heart of America's Midwest lies a sleepy town nestled between rolling hills and whispering cornfields. The town was known simply as Elm Street. It was a place where secrets ran deeper than the roots of the ancient oak that stood guard at its entrance, and where the dead sometimes refused to stay buried. Our story begins with a young man. Let's call him Ethan, though his last name would be revealed later. Ethan was someone you might pass by every day and not give a second thought. He kept to himself, mostly sleeping early and waking up late, a habit that had always been a source of quiet amusement for the town's gossips. People often remarked about how pale he was, attributing it to his nocturnal ways. But recently, Ethan's nights had taken a turn from ordinary into the realm of the eerie. Every night before dawn, he would wake up with a start, his heart pounding like a drum solo in a horror movie. At first, these disturbances were sporadic, but then they became nightly occurrences, as regular as clockwork. And always there would be this coldness around him, a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn weather outside. He would sit up in bed, his eyes adjusting to the dim light of the moon seeping through his window, only to find that he wasn't in his bed. Sometimes he would wake up sitting upright in a chair in the living room, his blanket and pillow askew nearby. Other times, he would find himself sprawled out on the cold, hard floor, his room silent and empty. It wasn't just the change of location that unnerved him. It was the little details, the sudden cold breeze in a room with all the windows shut tight, the doors that were slightly ajar as if someone had just stepped out, and the whispers. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, rustling voices that died down the moment he tried to make sense of them. Struggling to piece together these fragmented moments, Ethan began to suspect that he might be sleepwalking, but that couldn't be it. He knew he didn't have a history of sleepwalking. Wasn't sleepwalking usually associated with harmless activities like eating or even talking? Why would he wander around his own house in the middle of the night? And why did those whispers seem to follow him? One night, he decided to get to the bottom of this. Once he woke up in his living room, instead of going back to bed, he stayed awake, watching the clock tick towards midnight. As the hours passed and the shadows grew longer, he felt a pull, an unexplainable urge to move. And before he knew it, he was walking, sleepily making his way out of his house and into the night. He walked until he came to a clearing in the woods at the edge of Elm Street. A shiver went down his spine as he realized what he had been doing all along. He was following a path that his sleepwalking had been taking him on every night. But why? What was at the end of this path? Determined to uncover the truth, Ethan resolved to follow his sleepwalking self the next time it happened. He set his alarm for the witching hour, donned a thick jacket against the October chill, grabbed a flashlight and waited. As the minutes ticked by, the suspense grew thicker than the fog that began to roll in. Then he heard the telltale creak of the floorboard as someone got out of bed. Peeking out his window, he saw a familiar sight. His sleepwalking doppelganger was making his way to the front door. This time, Ethan was ready. As the duplicate stepped out into the night, Ethan quietly followed, keeping a safe distance. The night was alive with eerie sounds. The wind seemed to moan through the trees, and the occasional hoot of an owl sounded like a warning. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the air grew colder, and the trees, gnarled and twisted, seemed to reach out like skeletal fingers. Then he saw it. In the clearing ahead, the duplicate stopped. There, standing silently, was a tall, dark figure. Its face was obscured by the shadows, but it turned slowly, as if sensing Ethan's presence. For a moment, their eyes met, and Ethan felt a jolt of recognition, as if he had known this being from another life. It was a shadow figure, a creature of pure darkness that seemed to drink in the moonlight. It was a sight that would have sent most people running, but something held Ethan in place. As the shadow figure beckoned with a finger, the trees around them rustled violently, forming a vortex of leaves that concealed both the duplicate and the path ahead. Moments later, when the leaves settled and the wind died down, the path was gone. In its place was a swirling mist that added an ethereal touch to the scene. Yet the shadow figure remained, its gaze unwavering. As the confrontation dragged on, the shadow figure began to solidify, taking on a more human-like form. Faint details emerged. A man in old-fashioned clothing, a top hat perched on his head, a walking stick in his hand, and then there were the eyes. They gleamed with an otherworldly light, filled with an ancient sorrow that seemed to echo the town's own buried griefs. Suddenly, the figure raised its head and let out a long, low whistle. The sound reverberated through the trees, carrying a melody that was both haunting and strangely beautiful. It was a tune that seemed to weave tales of a bygone era, of joys and sorrows long forgotten. As the music swelled, the mist around the figure swirled faster, coalescing into a shape. A woman, she appeared, as if from a dream, her form shimmering like moonlight on water. Her dress flowed around her ankles, and her hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall. She joined the man, and together they danced, not a waltz, but a strange, unsettling jig that seemed to mock the solemnity of the woods. The dancing continued for what felt like hours, the man and the woman lost in a world of their own. Then, as abruptly as they had started, the music and the dancing stopped. The woman faded back into the mist, leaving the man alone once more. He took a step toward Ethan, and in that instant, the moonlight glinted off something in his hand. It was a ring, an ornate silver band with a large emerald set in its center. The stone pulsed with an eerie green light, matching the glint in the man's eye. Then he pointed. His finger was long and skeletal, tipped with a nail that shone like polished bone. He was pointing at something behind Ethan, at the base of the old oak that guarded the entrance to Elm Street. The urgency in his gesture was clear. Ethan turned and gasped. There, half hidden by the tangled roots, was a small wooden box. It looked old, as if it had been buried and forgotten. Curiosity and a sense of foreboding washed over him as he approached the box. As he reached for it, his fingers brushed against something cold, something that shouldn't have been there. Startled, he pulled back, and the box lid creaked open. Inside lay a folded piece of paper. Unfolding it, Ethan found a faded photograph. On the left was the image of the man and woman dancing in the clearing, their forms almost translucent. On the right was a picture of a house, a grand old mansion with a porch that wrapped around its facade. The house looked eerily familiar, yet impossibly out of place in their small town. Just then, the man stepped out from behind the tree, his expression a mixture of sadness and pleading. Before Ethan could react, a loud bang echoed through the woods. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, jarring and dissonant. The man's form flickered, and in a voice that was both whisper and roar, he spoke, "Don't forget." Then he was gone, vanished like smoke in the wind. Ethan stumbled back, clutching the photograph and the box. As quickly as they had appeared, the woods grew silent. The mist had thickened, and the trees swayed gently in the breeze, hiding their secrets once more. Startled by the sudden noise, Ethan dropped the box. The photograph fluttered to the ground, landing face down in a pool of moonlight. He stared at the spot where the man had stood, his heart pounding in his chest. A twig snapped somewhere nearby, and Ethan whirled around, his flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. But there was nothing there, only the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Suddenly, a piercing whistle cut through the night, the same tune that the man had played. Panic seized him. He turned and fled, stumbling over roots and rocks, desperate to escape the haunting melody. He ran until he reached his house, collapsing on the porch steps, gasping for breath. As he slowly regained his composure, he realized he was soaked in sweat, and his clothes were torn. Shaking, he fumbled for his keys and unlocked the door. He made his way to his bedroom, each step echoing his pounding heart. As he lay down on his bed, he tried to piece together what he had just experienced. Was it a dream? Had he truly encountered a ghost or something worse? And then he noticed the time. It was barely past midnight. How could he have sleepwalked so far and returned without waking up? Confused and frightened, he pulled the covers over his head, desperate for a semblance of safety. But sleep evaded him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the dancing ghost, heard the mournful whistle, and felt the icy touch of the man's bony finger. As the first rays of sunlight crept through his window, Ethan awoke with a start. He sat up, his heart still racing, and looked around his room. Everything seemed normal, untouched, but in the corner his flashlight lay abandoned, a silent witness to his night of terror. Slowly, he got out of bed and began to search for clues. The photograph was still on his bedside table, the box with the letter beside it. Carefully, he unfolded the letter and read the faded words. To whoever finds this, if you seek the truth, follow the song of the will-o-wisp. The will-o-wisp, he thought. Could it be the ghost? But what song? As he pondered this, his eyes fell on the photograph of the house. It looked vaguely familiar. Could this house hold the answers he sought? With a deep breath, Ethan decided to investigate. He dressed quickly and set out for the town center where the old will-o-wisp mansion stood, shrouded in mist and mystery. The adventure was just beginning. So was the sleepwalker really sleepwalking? Or was he being haunted? And what was the connection between the mysterious house and the ghostly couple? Find out in our next episode. But remember, some sleepwalkers never fully wake up.